Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about personalized learning. And we're calling this personalized learning because that is what schools in our area are calling having students be in charge of their own learning, setting their own learning goals. As we talk through these concepts, though, you are going to notice how everything we discuss is based on universal design for learning concepts. So this all started with Plato many, many, many years ago when the learning process was all about getting people excited, fostering passion for learning and really cultivating the ability for students to critically apply knowledge. And teaching and learning was one-on-one. So it wasn't one teacher and 34 students. It was one teacher and one learner. Can you imagine Plato even standing in front of a classroom with 30 children? No, there would be no direct instruction back then. So personalized learning is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. Plato started it 2,400 years ago. Vygotsky, and I know you all are familiar with him and with his concepts, he said that students can't just memorize facts. They need to learn to be able to solve their own problems. They need to be able to master a set of mental tools. And once they've done that, then they can be in charge of their own learning. And that's the point of education, period. So Lev Vygotsky was the founder of constructivism, and his ideas focus on three themes. Social interaction is very, very important. So development takes place on the social level and then on an individual level. And the more knowledgeable other, and that might be you as the teacher, it might be a more knowledgeable peer. It may be that you're working with third graders and you match them with a fifth grade classroom. It's anyone that has more understanding than the actual learner. And that, like I said, teacher, coach, another adult, peers, technology. And then you remember the concept of the zone of proximal development. And that is the distance between a learner's ability to perform a task under adult guidance and the ability of the learner to solve that problem independently. And learning really occurs in this zone. Now, we want our students to become creative and innovative, and that was what Vygotsky said the purpose of education was. Learning is active. Our learners are constructing new ideas and concepts based on their current and prior knowledge, social interactions, and motivation to learn. Students are in charge of their own learning. And when we are part of a community of learners who support one another, we learn more. So Dewey's theory supports education, it supports learning in the outside world, real life. What we learn should be meaningful and relevant. Dewey reminded us that we need to think about and implement new instructional approaches based on what society is going to need in the future. And, picture what classrooms to be like, especially last year before the pandemic hit. And what would Dewey think about how we were teaching and learning then, right? Is anything different than what we were doing 100 years ago? Now, I think with the pandemic, now things are starting to change. I really hope we take advantage of this opportunity to personalize learning a little bit more. So curriculum should be developed based on the student's interests. And John Dewey was like a nope to the idea that children are motivated by rewards and punishments. He didn't believe that. So Bruner, outcome of cognitive development is thinking. There are 4 parts to Bruner's theory of instruction. Predisposition to learn. So students have motivational, cultural, personal factors that contribute to their predisposition to learn. Social factors influence it as well. And we want to teach our children to maintain that love of learning. We want to cultivate a child's love of exploration. We want to make sure that we're sequencing things appropriately because that can really impact learning. And Bruner's theory really relates to what Vygotsky's work was. So you can kind of see some connections there, even though Vygotsky definitely published his work later. I really like this Mihaly's work. He was noted for his work in the study of happiness and creativity. He came up with the concept of flow, and this is when you are fully immersed in what you're doing. Like time just goes by. So there's a really great balance between the challenge of the task and the skill of the learner. It's not too easy, it's not too difficult. Have you ever experienced flow, and what were you doing? This is when you're so engaged in something you don't want to stop. And this is what we want our students doing with learning, guys. This is exactly what it means for learners to own and drive their own learning. Carol Dweck, her contribution to theory was the fixed versus growth mindsets. So less about personality, more about mindset. We really have to communicate to our students that we learn from failure, that we find our setbacks motivating, that we keep trying, and we don't give up. So we don't want to hear our students say something like, I'm not good at math. We want our students to sort of identify maybe that they didn't study as much as they should have, or in an appropriate way, in a beneficial way. We want our learners to understand the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset and give them the tools to be able to move forward. I want you to be really careful with labels. In education, we tend to gravitate towards labels with learning styles. Oh, that student likes to learn, is a hands-on learner. Okay, guys, all people learn better when they are able to manipulate objects. That shouldn't be a label we affix to anyone. Multiple intelligences. So we won't say that, somebody's a verbal linguistic learner. It can be a piece of the puzzle. You can start to figure out that student prefers to have things in writing, or that student prefers to hear things said aloud, but don't affix a label to a child. We're really bad about that with reading levels and standardized test scores as well. And the reason we want to try and steer clear of labels is that they can cause a fixed mindset, even within us as teachers, and that can be difficult to break. So learning is fluid. We as learners change and develop and shift over time. So we know from brain research that the brain is adaptive and ever-changing, and this concept is called neuroplasticity. You learn when your brain is active, period. So if your brain is engaged in the work, you are learning. And if you are just sitting and zoning out, you are not learning. Guys, that is why we know so much more about the content that we teach than the content that we're sitting in someone else's classroom to learn. Because our brains are actively trying to figure out how to communicate that information. That's how we learn. And today, or this week rather, you are going to be thinking about your personalized learning program and your class learning snapshot. So you're going to pull up the How I Learn Best template and talk about some highlights with maybe your roommates or someone close to you. And you are going to be thinking through your challenges and your strengths as a learner, but also your preferences and needs. So a preference for access would be maybe you like a folder system for your digital files. Maybe you like to create or collect images for group projects. Maybe you need to present with visuals. Perhaps you prefer using digital files for all of your instruction materials. Maybe you like to lead group activities. Perhaps you like to write a blog or draw pictures to learn information or to express what you know. So what are your preferences and what are your needs? There are differences between those two concepts. And one more thing I want to highlight before we finish this up is you will hear different verbiage. Sometimes we say learners, sometimes we say students. I would like, and I'm still in this process as well, I would like to see us shift our conceptual thinking from students to learners. And here's why. When we say students, we're thinking of people that learn in a classroom. They are given a task to do. They follow the objectives. They do the assignment. They figure out information to meet the assignment's needs, and they get a grade, right? Learners develop their own learning goals. They monitor their progress in meeting those goals. They have a purpose or an interest to learn something. They're asking questions. They're looking for information. They find ways to collaborate with others when they want to know something, not for a grade. They are curious about life and they never stop learning. So I don't think it's just a name change. I don't think we say learners instead of students. I think we really start to reconceptualize how we think about the children in our rooms. And the so what we're going to finish on is that UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is the framework that allows us to set up a personalized learning environment. So this is really where we want to head, what we want to do to get our students to be set up for lifelong learning.